Hello, and welcome to the Elements of Whiskey, our weekly, normally in Dutch, whiskey podcast. Yes. But today we are not speaking Dutch. No, we are doing this episode in English because we have a special guest here today. Quick rundown. Normally we'll try a whiskey, have a quick chat about it, and then just discuss what we think about it. But this whiskey, it deserves way more attention. So we are calling Ciara Hepburn. She's working for the Isle of Raasay distillery, and we're going to have a quick chat about the whiskey itself.
And the distillery.
And the island.
This rather new distillery, the island, the community, the whiskey making process, and the fact that they have a hotel.
Oh yes, so if you're planning on traveling to Scotland, definitely stay in their own distillery hotel. Come on, all this in this episode and way more. So please sit back, relax, pour yourself a glass of Raasay, and we'll be calling in, live from Scotland, Ciara Hepburn. We are currently having a quick chat with Ciara. Hello, how are you?
Yes, good, very good, thanks.
You are a familiar face. We've talked to you 2 years ago, and it's such a pleasure to speak to you again. For the people who don't know you, could you please introduce yourself and how you started working in the whiskey industry?
Sure. So I'm fairly new to the Isle of Raasay distillery. I joined back in January this year. A really exciting time to join an evolving whiskey distillery. As you said, I met you guys 2 years ago whilst I was working in whiskey, but for an independent bottler. So pretty much the other side of the coin in terms of Scotch whiskey. I've went from talking about lots of different distilleries and lots of different styles of whiskey, not just Scottish whiskey, but world whiskey too. Whereas now I'm talking about one whiskey, one distillery from one place. So completely other side of the coin. But yeah, I guess my history in the whiskey industry has been exciting. I've always worked for independent family-owned businesses, and the Isle of Raasay is no different to that. I started out working for an independent bottler, which then evolved into a new distillery, which was part of Morrison Bowmore, which then became Glasgow Morrison Distillers, which you may know, the independent bottling group A.D. Rattray, which then went on to build the Clydeside Distillery in Glasgow. So a family with loads of rich history in Scotch whisky, and with some of the most famous distilleries in the world, as I mentioned, Bowmore, Craigellachie, and of course Auchentoshan too. I then went on to work for another independent bottler, family-owned small company, and I worked as brand manager for them for around 4 years. So, really involved in everything from cask maturation or re-racking programs right through to the export side of things too. So when I left the company, we were exporting to around 27 markets globally, and that was all pretty much done from just the two of us. I've now joined a much bigger team, I guess fairly small if we think about other Scotch whisky distilleries, but a much larger team to what I'm used to working in a really unique and special place in Scotland. And I really believe that what they're doing at the Isle of Raasay is something special and something to celebrate. So I'm really looking forward to talking to you about all the nitty-gritty bits that's going on the island.
I'm looking forward to hearing the story about the island itself. But how would you describe your current job at Raasay? Like, what is your job? What do you do? What do you do?
So my official title is Sales and Brand Development Manager for EMEA. So that's focused on Europe, the Middle East, and Africa too. But a large proportion of my time is really spent building the brand in Europe. So I don't like to think that anyone works in sales in Scotch whisky, but it's more kind of brand development and relationship development too. So as you'll know, Europe's a huge part of our market. So our two current largest markets are based in Europe. So a lot of my time is spent, maintaining and helping to grow and strengthen those ones, and finding new markets to work within too.
Okay, so it's basically just expanding Raasay to different countries so that more people can enjoy it.
Exactly, and I think not just so that more people can enjoy it, but I think for me personally, it's that more people understand it.
And what is there to understand about?
I
Yeah.
was about to ask, yes.
So, so we think that we're doing something, or we know that we're doing something very unique. And I use the word unique often, and it can be used in pretty much every aspect of our business, right down to our single malt, right down to our unique production processes, right through to the bottling too. So I think that our single malt, which was launched in May last year, May 2021, was the first batch of our single malt. It's made up of a unique 6-cask recipe. So it's the first of its kind that I know of, not just in Scotch whisky, but in world whisky. So right through from the cask types that we're using down to the oak species, and the spirit types that we're using too, which is we're using 2 different spirit types, which we'll go on to talk about a bit more about later, I'm sure.
What I find very funny is like the bottle itself. It looks very beautiful. There's a very interesting story that I want to ask about the fossil, the fossil in the bottle, because that is one of the first things that like jumps in the eye. Like, what is the story behind it? While I just pour us a glass, because that's also very important.
That's what we're doing here.
Sure. So it's a good question. The bottle is something that people talk about a lot and want to know more about. It's not just a bottle that looks good, although it happens to do that too. As a company, everything that we do has to represent and reflect the island and the people that live there. I think as a company, the island itself is our biggest asset. It's such a special location, and really when we thought about, you know, what's the Isle of Raasay single malt going to look like, it had to be a representation of that. So during lockdown, actually, my colleagues on the island, they took a clay mould around the island and they indented parts of the landscape into the mould. So whether that be foliage, rocks, parts of the rugged terroir that's on Raasay, including the Raasay fossil that you mentioned and printed in the glass. It was then sent off to be 3D scanned and printed. So the bottle itself is literally a reflection of the landscape, and every sort of mark and indent in the glass currently represents something that's on the island.
So this is a
It
piece
is
of the
holding
island.
a piece of the island in your hand. Exactly. Yeah.
It's so cool. And what I find very nice as from a consumer point of view, on the side of the label, the 6 cask types that you mentioned are very clearly labeled. Before we talk about the cask, let's talk about the spirit, because there are 2 types of spirit you mentioned.
There are, yes. So we're producing 2 types of spirit at the Isle of Raasay distillery. We're producing unpeated spirit and heavily peated spirit. So those are done in 3-month batches, so 6 months of the year peated, 6 months of the year unpeated. We originally did it in that timeline, so 6 months peated, 6 months unpeated, but we found that as a new distillery it started to kind of throw off our stock levels with peated and unpeated spirit, so we quickly moved to 3 months peated, 3 months unpeated, and then the same again. We're not producing 2 identical new make spirits. There's certain parts of the production process that are changed for both peated and unpeated. So our peated spirit comes off a much heavier, kind of more oily spirit, and our unpeated is a much lighter, more fruitier spirit. So those are matured separately, and then they're married together for bottling to produce a lightly peated character overall. So our overall distillery character, what we really want to achieve, is a lightly peated spirit balanced with rich dark fruits.
So we have 2 different types of spirits, and there are 6 casks, like types of casks, or is it like you fill up 3 types of cask but with both spirits?
Exactly. So there's 3 cask types, but one's filled with unpeated spirit and the other's filled with peated spirit, so 6 in total.
And what are the cask types?
So the first is a virgin chinkpin oak.
Okay.
And if you've not heard of chinkpin oak before, or you may not have tasted it, it's an American oak. Usually when we think about American oak, we think about the oak species Quercus alba, which is typically used for both bourbon and rye maturation. This is not Quercus alba oak. The oak species is Quercus muhlenbergi. It's a very sweet oak. You can actually eat the acorns off the tree. And it's a white oak. So as I mentioned, virgin oak to us, and they're high char, fresh toasted casks. So they're very fast-acting casks. They take on colour and character, or our spirit takes on colour and character very quickly. It gives us a lot of those sweet flavours, kind of like toffee, honey and heather notes. And again, it's interesting to kind of taste the individual spirit types in the oak casks, so the peated versus the unpeated with the chinkapin oak. The char level's 4 as well, so the casks are black on the inside when they come into us.
And if you compare it like a regular virgin oak cask and like this chinkapin virgin oak cask, are there some differences? Like, because like sweeter notes I can also expect from a regular virgin oak cask, but what are those some typical chinkapin notes?
Yeah, for me it is really that kind of toffeed character. I guess as you mentioned that may come from the toast and the caramelization, but I think that kind of honeyed heather, which may be down to, of course, we're classed as a Highland distillery, so that kind of honey and heather note can be commonly associated with Highland style spirits. But there is just such a kind of round and well-balanced sweetness. There's so much flavour going on in the chinkapin oak. And it's something that we're kind of working with is bottling these kind of individual cask samples so that people can taste, an unpeated chinkapin versus a peated chinkapin, and so on.
Oh, that's so cool.
Nice.
And then,
like that.
So we have the peated and unpeated chinkapin. The second barrel type?
Second cask type is ex-Bordeaux red wine casks.
I love it.
So we're typically working with 3 chateaux in Bordeaux for our wine casks. Chateau Margaux, Chateau Mouton Rothschild, and Chateau Calon Segur. So really high quality Bordeaux red wines, some of the finest Bordeaux red wines that you can buy. The reason that we're working with these chateaux and the reason that we're allowed to talk about them is that we have a relationship with them directly. I think that red wine casks can have a mixed reception, and I think that commonly refers to STR casks. Our casks are not STR, they're fresh red wine casks, and we request that they've been used for at least 3 vintages before they come into us. So they're, again, completely soaking with high quality red wine. We only buy the wine casks October through February so that they come in the colder months, so we don't have to use any cleaning methods at all. So what we're looking for in the red wine casks is, going back to that distillery character that I spoke about, that lightly peated with rich dark fruits. That rich dark fruits is really coming from these red wine casks. So your sort of like dark cherries, your blueberries. But interestingly, and one of my favourite aspects to the wine casks is that kind of saline and saltiness. Of course, we are a coastal distillery. We're made and matured by the sea. So I love that kind of coastal saltiness that the red wine cask brings out in the spirit.
So you say like also on the coastal side, it's like all the barrels age in your own warehouses at the coast?
Yes, so we can maybe briefly talk about the distillery and the people if it's a natural time to do so. So as I mentioned, the island is one of our biggest assets, both the island and the people, of course, that live there. And we, as a company and as a distillery, we want to do as much on the island as possible. If a job can be done on Raasay, then it will and should be done on the Isle of Raasay. It's a very remote island, so just off the coast of Skye. We're 25 minutes on the ferry from the Isle of Skye. So around 11 miles from Talisker Distillery, which I'm sure many of you will have heard of before. Home to just 161 people. So it's a very small island, yeah. A lot of people work in the distillery, yeah. So currently on our at the distillery, as part of our distillery team, we have around 30 people working on the island at the Isle of Raasay distillery, and everyone has to live there. So we're trying to kind of create as much and maintain as much of employment as we can, and skilled employment too. So everything from our distillery manager is born and bred on the Isle of Raasay. Rosie, who's our operations lead, is born and bred on the Isle of Raasay. She went to Glasgow for university, and she came back to the island to work in the distillery to head up our operations. Even our content creation is done on the Isle of Raasay. So So to answer your question, yes, every cask of Raasay that has ever been filled that isn't in a glass bottle is currently lying on the Isle of Raasay. So there's just certain parts to that are important to us beyond that too. And one of those things is water. So we're one of the very few distilleries in Scotland that's using the same water throughout the entire process. So right from our original mash right through to the dilution of our single malt bottling. So again, we talk about our Raasay water quite a lot. So it should be used through the entirety of the process.
Why is water on Raasay so special? Why is it so unique?
So Raasay is the landscape's volcanic. So our water comes from the highest point in Raasay, which is called Duncan. There's a borehole out the back of the distillery, so that provides the water for all of our production processes. Our water is very mineral rich, and in particular it's rich in something called manganese, which we think brings out that kind of fruity character. It aids fermentation, so it brings out a really fruity character in our new make spirit. So our water is a really important part of our production process and of the island.
So the water comes from the island. Is everything, the grains, the yeast, is that all? I mean, Raasay is a small island from what I hear. Does everything come from the island, or do you also have to import some stuff?
No, it does not come from the island. If you take one thing away today about the Isle of Raasay, is that it's a very wet island. On average, it's around 100% wetter than the east coast of Scotland. So it's very hard to grow anything on the Isle of Raasay. However, we have been carrying out some Raasay barley trials. So we have had 2 successful harvests of Raasay barley so far. The barley that has been successfully grown is successfully grown in the Arctic Circle. So that gives you an idea as to the kind of conditions and the climate that we're working with. But it really is an arable land, and it's not easy to grow anything on Raasay. So although we do have these kind of Raasay barley trials, and we do have some Raasay barley spirit maturing on the island, we've also used Raasay peat for the Raasay barley. But for our usual production, it's Highland peat and Highland barley that we use. And I'll just mention the third cask type, because I think that
Yeah,
there
was a moment I was going to answer about. Yeah.
So the third cask type that we're using is ex-American rye casks. So again, when we think about American oak, or even American whiskey, in terms of Scotch maturation, we do think about ex-bourbon casks. Now, we're not typically working with ex-bourbon at the Isle of Raasay. Ex-American rye makes up a core part of our single malt, and we're typically working with Woodford Reserve Distillery for these ex-American rye casks. So Woodford have a rye mash bill of around 53%, so we're getting loads of those kind of black pepper and spicy notes, but without a heavy grassy note that you can get in distilleries with a higher rye mash bill.
I find it very cool that that we can also know, like, from which chateaus the wine casks from and the rye casks.
Yeah,
It's
very transparent. I like that. I was just wondering, so on your website, because I did a bit of research, on your website I read about the Nasia series. I hope I'm saying that correctly. And it said that it's also a series of 6 recipes. Does that correlate with those casks, or?
Yeah, exactly.
So the peated and unpeated in the...
Yeah, so our single malt, which we sometimes refer to as our Nasia single malt. So Nasia means the 6 in Gaelic. So it does refer to those 6 cask types. And that really is the cask composition that makes up the Isle of Raasay single malt. So we've got the unpeated virgin Chinkapin oak, the ex-Bordeaux red wine, unpeated, and the unpeated ex-American rye. And then we've got the peated Chinkapin virgin oak, the peated ex-Bordeaux red wine, and the peated ex-American rye. So that is what we refer to as the Nasia recipe.
Ah, that's very interesting.
I see.
I'm so excited.
Right.
Like we poured ourselves a glass, and I've been like smelling of it, and
smells so good.
it's so good. Could you guide us quickly through a quick nosing and tasting? Like, what do you get out of it yourself?
So it's really interesting for me to pick out those individual cask types. So, you of course don't do this every time you have the Isle of Raasay single malt. But for the purposes of this, let's start thinking about the 6 individual casks and what they bring to the spirit. So as I mentioned with the Chinkapin oak, look for that sweetness, look for that kind of toffee note, that honey, that heather. And there's even some kind of a malted note, like malted granary bread in there.
Yeah.
I'm getting definitely like the freshly baked bread vibes from it. Definitely, yeah.
But for me, something that's a bit more prominent is the fruity, like blackberries and stuff. Is that? But that's from a different cask.
Exactly. So let's move on to the Bordeaux casks. That's exactly the flavour profile that we're looking for, that kind of fruity note. So it's really dark fruits, like as I mentioned, dark cherries, blackberries, kind of heavier dark fruits, even kind of raisins, but also that kind of saltiness, coastal saltiness should really be coming through too. And then finally, and again, a really important aspect to our core single malt is that spiciness, that black pepper note, and those are coming from the ex-American rye casks.
What I find very nice is if I look at the peatiness, it doesn't feel like this medicinal heavy peatiness. It has more this earthy, fresh, grassy type of.
It's not your Isla peat.
No, definitely
that
not.
You
And I
always like so much.
No, but I really like it that it's so. I can't compare it to a different type of peat. It's like it's something very on its own, which I find very interesting.
Yeah, it's interesting that you said that, Max, because when our co-founders established our R&B distillers, or the Isle of Raasay distillery, they set out to create a lost style of Hebridean single malt Scotch whisky. So when we think about Hebridean single malt, we can think about Islay distilleries. I guess even now we have Tobermory and Leitchik. And there's now more distilleries being built in the Hebrides of Scotland over on our sister island on Harris, on Uist too, and of course on Barra. But really there is a lost style of Hebridean single malt whisky, which I guess if we think about an Old Bowmore with that kind of tropical fruits, that kind of coastal peat. And as you mentioned, this isn't Islay peat. We're not using Islay peat at all. And we're not looking for any of those medicinal notes that you get in Islay peat. We're looking for a more kind of like coastal bonfire smoke and a real kind of saltiness. So you're right in saying that it's almost nothing. It compares to nothing else, because that's really what we've set out to create.
And do you feel like if there are many more islands popping up doing the same, I'm saying style, this lost style of Hebridean whiskey, is this something which we might in the future see as a new category re-emerging from Scotland? Is that something which you strive for?
Yeah, I guess it's an interesting question, because the Hebrides do have a very distinct flavour out with Islay, and there's more distilleries popping up in that part of Scotland. So I guess the answer is I don't know, but it'll be interesting to see. I know that Harris, of course, are due to release their whisky anytime now, and it'll be interesting to see their flavour profile and what kind of single malt it is that they're producing. But I think so we fall into this category as Highland single malt, which of course ranges from everything from Loch Lomond, right up to the Isle of Orkney. So it covers such a huge area of Scotland, and such a variety of different styles of Scotch whisky. So I would love there to be an island category out with Islay, but I think that's been spoke about for many years to come. But interestingly, one of the things that the Hebrides are pretty good at the minute is producing Hebridean gin. If we think about the gin distilleries that are focused on that part of the world, could there be a category for Hebridean gin? I'm not sure.
Yeah, gin is something, if we have some more time, we'll talk about in a bit. I want to have a quick sip because I still haven't tried it yet. So, cheers. Surprisingly, I was expecting way more peatiness, which in the first taste I was overwhelmed by the sweetness and the fruitiness.
Oh, it's very good.
What are some tasting notes you get yourself, Ciara?
So we like to talk about this American diner's breakfast, and it's got all the components of that. So if we talk about the pancakes that are at the bottom, you do get that kind of malty note from the pancakes. And then if we think about the syrup that's on top of the pancakes, okay, we're going back to that kind of chinkapin oak, that kind of toffee flavours, and I guess butterscotch too. And then on top of the pancakes, we've got streaky bacon, smoked streaky bacon. So we've got that kind of smokiness, that saltiness, and I guess that kind of burnt flavours from the peat as well. And then on top of that, we've got loads of cracked black pepper, and loads of kind of cinnamon spices that are coming through from the American oak casks, from the ex-American rye casks. So just loads of kind of spicy flavours. But for me, and what I really love about it is the saltiness.
Yeah, it has this very maritime spirit to it. Yeah, definitely. How did the idea from the distillery came to be? Like, how did it start? Like, was it a conversation during a glass of whiskey, or how did it all came to be?
Yeah, so we have two co-founders behind the Isle of Raasay distillery, or R&B distillers, and I guess they both set out with the same goal, but different ideas of how they were going to get there. So one of our co-founders, Bill Dobby, was a tech veteran, a successful entrepreneur in the tech industry, which of course is ever-changing and fast-moving, and things are evolving all the time. So he really wanted to create a intergenerational, long-term family business. And I think if you live in Scotland and you're looking to create an intergenerational, long-term family business, you quite quickly end up in whiskey. Now our other co-founder, Alistair Day, did have experience in Scotch whisky. He inherited his great-grandfather's blending book, and he really set out to recreate the recipes within this blending book that he inherited. Now he had plans to build a distillery down in the borders of Scotland, and him and Bill met back in, I think it was around 2014, with this same goal to build a whisky distillery. Now, Bill's best friend from school, who is called Ian Hector Ross, he lives in Inverness, but him and Bill went to school together in Glasgow. His wife is from the Isle of Raasay, and when Bill mentioned the idea of building a distillery, he said, "Well, I know just the place, let me take you." So they drove to Skye and then got the ferry over to the Isle of Raasay. So they went to the site of what we call Borrowdale House, which at that point was derelict. So they turned around and looked out, and the view from Raasay, it looks out over onto the Coolin on Skye. It is the best distillery view in Scotland. We don't just think that, we know that. So it took Bill to look at the view once, and he thought, this is the spot. So he took Alistair over to the island and let Alistair experience it for himself. And with that view, it's really hard not to understand why you would want to build a distillery there, and why you would want people to experience that view for themselves. And I think Raasay's surrounded by celebrity islands. We spoke about them already. We've got the Isle of Skye, we've got the Isle of Harris. I guess even Barra and Tiree, Mull, and of course Islay, so well known for tourism. But Raasay's a little bit of a forgotten island. It's 161 people. It's tourists have always come to Raasay, but not in their hundreds of thousands the way that they do with, say, Skye or Harris, for example. So I think we really wanted to bring people to Raasay to have a reason for them to visit, to see the view, to meet the people, all the aspects of the Isle of Raasay that are special to us. We really wanted to showcase that. And that we've actually, when the distillery was designed and our visitor centre was built, we had no idea how many people would want to come and visit the distillery. So our visitor centre actually had to be redesigned this year to accommodate the number of visitors that we get. And everyone benefits from the distillery on Raasay, not just the people that work there, but of course local businesses too, whether that's the Calmac ferry or the postman or the local B&Bs. So it has really became part of an integral part of the island. One island, one spirit, we like to say, and it is very, there is really a togetherness. And the people on Raasay are, it is a really remote part of Scotland, and it's amazing to see how they just kind of come together and fix things with what they have, and how they can just adapt sort of anything that's there. And I think, as I'm not from the Isle of Raasay, so I absolutely love spending time there and just seeing how life is when you don't have access to such normal things. So it's really amazing, and the people that live there are very special, and I think that it's only right that the people that work for the Isle of Raasay distillery and the people that make the whisky are such an integral part of the island, and vice versa. So that's how the Isle of Raasay distillery came to be. And as I said, Bill and Alistair really set out to create this kind of lost style of Hebridean single malt. And they also set out to become Scotland's kind of lead artisanal distillers. So we've just submitted, or we're in the midst of submitting plans for a second distillery, which is going to be in the Campbelltown region of Scotland. So we're currently working on plans for what will be called the Machrihanish distillery.
That is so exciting.
Looking forward to it.
Yes,
Really
very
looking forward
much.
to it.
So speaking of future plans, so this is your signature bottling, am I right?
This is our core single malt, exactly.
And all there's a bunch of other whiskies on the website. I got the impression that most of them are limited editions. Is that correct?
Yeah, so really everything that we are trying to do at the minute is focused around this core single malt. So it really encapsulates everything that we're trying to achieve. The whiskies on the website, perhaps you've seen our distillery special release. So it was firstly made available via the distillery directly, either through our visitor centre or our online shop. So that was made available, or that was bottled last November. Slightly different cask composition. So firstly matured in the ex-American rye casks, and then finished in both two types of sherry, so Oloroso and Pedro Jimenez water casks. So quite a different flavour profile to the single malt. The only other bottlings that you'll see on the website will probably be the Nashia single casks. So as I mentioned earlier, it'll be the single casks that make up the core single malt.
So
But
you could buy all the 6 different ones and try to make to recreate it at home?
You could, yeah, you could.
And are there any plans for more additions to the core range?
Yeah, so I guess we are evolving, but we're still a relatively new distillery. So we actually just celebrated our 5th birthday in September. So I think that we're kind of finding this balance just now about promoting and talking about the single malt. It's really important for us that people understand it. There's 2 spirit types, this really unique 6 cask recipe. And the 6 cask types that make up the single malt probably make up to over 80% of our stock holdings at the distillery. The other 20%, or even slightly less, are other casks, which will be used for kind of small batch releases, speciality bottlings and things like that. There's no plans for any of those for the end of this year. It will be the core single malt, and some of the distillery special release may be made available for some of our international markets too. But I don't know of any more plans for the end of this year for any other SKUs to be introduced.
So we'll have to
wait.
See.
Just one quick question. We're talking about the 2 different types of spirits, and I know that there are some geeks sitting at home with their notebooks just want to know, like, if we're talking about peat, every time I get the question is like, and what's the ppm? Is it something which you guys measure or which or is there a ballpark for the ppm, or does it not matter at all?
Yeah, well, if we're talking about ppm, so our peated barley for our peated spirit comes in around 48 to 50 ppm. By the time it goes through the distillation process, we're looking around kind of 12 to 15 ppm, but just for the heavily peated spirit. And then by the time that's married with the unpeated spirit for the core single malt, we're looking around kind of 6 to 8 ppm.
Oh wow. Okay, so it's 6 to 8 ppm. Okay, and the ratios we can't get in depth of it. But what was the alcohol, like the ABV of the whiskey?
It's 46.4.
It's very specific, like 46.4. Is it because of like it was the best combination of flavors, or was there another reason for it?
There is an answer to that. It depends how lighthearted you are and how serious you take these things. So our single malt was originally bottled at 46%. We promote ourselves and being open and honest, so I guess that this is the perfect opportunity to tell a story. So it was originally bottled at 46%. Now, just before we launched the single malt, our commercial director, my colleague William, held a tasting with a few other kind of island distilleries. So Highland Park was one of them. I think Tobermory was one of them too, and perhaps another distillery on Islay. And everyone's core single malt had a decimal point. Apart from ours, it hadn't been launched yet. So the next day he said to the team, we're going to have to introduce a decimal point into our single malt. So my colleague Chloe, who's based on the Isle of Raasay, she's our visitor centre manager. He said, Chloe, can you give me a number between 1 and 10? And we landed on 4. So that's why our single malt was 46.4.
That's the best story ever.
I like this principle.
Oh, I love it.
It probably made it for the better. It's
definitely
a lovely dram. It is.
Thank you so much. There were so many more things.
Yeah, we analysed it at loads of different. We analysed it 46.3, 46.8, and we all agreed that 46.4 really brought out that well-balanced dark fruit flavour.
Thank you so much.
Could I just ask one more question?
Sure.
I mean, you have to say if you don't want to discuss this, but on the website, it also says that this is the first legal Isle of Raasay whiskey in Scotch history. So that suggests that there is an illegal part of the history. Have there been many illicit distilleries on Raasay, or is that something that we should not discuss?
No, absolutely, we could discuss it. So yeah, we are the first and the only legal Scotch whisky distillery to ever be built on the Isle of Raasay. Illicit distilling was a huge part of the island, and there is actually evidence of a still being processed even around 1826. So there's loads of history and loads of different examples of illicit distilling taking place on the island. As I mentioned, it's a really unique but isolated part of Scotland, harsh conditions. So it's understandable. But it's understandable that they may have had to create something to keep them warm during the winter. So there's a big history of illicit distilling taking place on the island.
Then one last thing, there's many people who start a distillery, you still distill your first spirit, you put it in a cask and then wait for 3 to 4 years and see your bank account slowly depleting. Is there some way which you can do like in the first few years which you've done?
We originally set out to be a Scotch whisky distillery, and we are, of course, a Scotch whisky distillery. We never had any intentions of producing gin. The first spirit that ran through our stills was always going to be bound for our single malt in the future. But as I mentioned, we wanted to create a reason for people to come and visit the Isle of Raasay. And people started to make the voyage over to visit us at the distillery. So pretty much every second person that came into the distillery asked to taste our gin, asked if we were producing a gin, asked when we would be producing a gin. So we started producing spirit for our single malt in 2017. It wasn't actually until 2019 that the Isle of Raasay gin was introduced into the distillery. So it wasn't something that we originally set out to create, although interestingly, the distillery was always set up to create a gin spirit. So we are using Italian stills in the distillery, so they're Forelli stills. It was actually very easy to start producing a gin from the production equipment that we already had in place. Also, juniper berries grow on the Isle of Raasay.
Oh.
I love that.
It's hard to get them because we've got so many deer and they love to eat the juniper berries. But in our Isle of Raasay gin, it does contain some hand-foraged Raasay juniper. So it was quite a natural fit that we started to produce a gin. And as I mentioned earlier, Hepburn gin is, especially with some of our sister islands, some of the best gin available to buy at the minute. So we wanted to kind of be part of that renaissance of Scottish gin. Our gin is citrus-led. It's made up of 10 botanicals, and as I said, that kind of hand-foraged Raasay juniper is one of the botanicals. We also have rhubarb root, orange peel, lemon peel, and some coriander seed in there too. The gin bottle has just been redesigned, very much in line with the single malt and that kind of reflection of the landscape. So if you see here, we've got the hand-foraged juniper down the bottom here, and we've got that Raasay fossil that we spoke about earlier.
I really liked it. The new bottle really looks so amazing. I'm looking forward. We should hunt down a bottle of the gin just to add here to try as well anytime soon. But I'm also looking very much forward to actually traveling to the Isle of Raasay very quickly, because it sounds so amazing and it sounds so lovely.
Yeah, I should also mention that we have a small hotel within the distillery. So we have 6 ensuite rooms, and so anyone can come and stay with us. They can wake up overlooking the Cuillins on Skye, and they can go to bed and wake up within the distillery. So we think we're the only distillery in Scotland that has a hotel actually within the distillery.
Let me just check my calendar.
Yeah, well, we'll be booking right after the recording.
I have a week off at the end of November, I think.
No, but it sounds so amazing. And if people want to get more information about the distillery itself, where can they go? Like on the website or Instagram or social medias?
Yeah, of course. So our website's a good place to start. There's loads of different blog posts on there that will take you back through the Raasay barley trials that I spoke about, the Nashia single cask recipe, everything to how the distillery was created. And it even goes back to talk about the history on the island and the people too. But we also have a Solange Club, which is where you'll get access to kind of first-hand information and exclusive bottlings too, like the Nashia single cask bottlings we spoke about earlier. And yet, of course, on our social media handles, which I'm sure you'll detail somewhere for people to access.
Thank you so much, Ciara. It was a pleasure to talk to you again. And we are very, very happily surprised by your single malt. It was very, very cool having you here.
It's lovely.
And we'll be just sitting here enjoying it a bit more. And we'll talk to you soon.
Yeah, I might do the same.
Thank you so much. Hey, Lucia.
Hey, Max. That was lovely.
That was amazing.
Yes.
Ciara, thank you so much for your time and talking to us. For the people at home, I hope you learned a bit about the new Isle of Raasay distillery. Even are so excited that you try to pick up a bottle for yourself. We can highly recommend it. Are there some more final notes that you want to give on the whiskey itself, like your personal tasting notes?
Not really. So it's really sweet. It has a lot of honey, of toffee, of cinnamon, and then the black fruits, like Ciara said, the dark fruits. So the blackcurrant, blackberry, cherries. It's just, it's so good.
And to be honest,
a bit spicy. It's a bit peaty, which we like.
Yeah, and to be honest, if you ever had a peated whiskey and be like, no, I don't like peated.
No, try this.
Try this. It's something completely different. It is more this earthy, fresh. The thing that what it also reminds me of, if you are building your own campfire, and you take a bucket of water and you just hose it down, this intense
the smoke
that comes out of the campfire. That is what it reminds me of. So it's not this medicinal, heavy. No, it's more this nice campfire-y type of peat. Maybe one of my favorite types of peat. Campfire-y types of peat.
Campfire-y types of peat.
Campfire-y. That's a very nice tasting note to end on. Hopefully you like this episode. If you do, please leave it a like. or a positive review. It helps us a lot. If you're looking on YouTube, please subscribe because we are doing more episodes in English. You can take a look. There are a few more guests from Scotland, from Ireland, from all over the place. So if you want to find more, there's definitely more in English. So take a look out for that. If you want to get in touch with us, you can do it on social media.
Exactly.
You can follow Lucia at Elements of Lucia.
Yes, or follow Max on at Elements of Whiskey, Facebook and Instagram.
And you can see what we're up to and see if there are new exciting episodes coming up. So give us a follow, give us a like, and we'll see you guys next time. Cheers!
Cheers!